Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to another live broadcast of A Coffee with Chris. As always, this live broadcast has been brought to you in association with our charity partner 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗀, who help local people in North 𝗄𝗵𝗃 affected by cancer. Now, I am so excited to bring into the digital room today Seb Mackay, who is the creative director and co-founder of Soba Private Label. These guys are the UK's most exclusive agency-to-agency copy shop. I have had a bee in my bonnet for a long time about crap copy, and I'm sure, Seb, you're going to tell me what is and what isn't, right?
Either that or I'm going to get dragged along the coals by you, aren't I? This could be a gotcha podcast where everything comes crashing down around me.
How are you, my friend? All right?
Yeah, I'm really good, man. I'm really good. I think on the phone I threatened to bring a whiskey, but I haven't done that. So I'm sorry about that. How have you been?
Very, very good, thank you. Let's kick off, Seb, with I think a really, really important question, because I see this mistake being made all the time. Everyone on LinkedIn and in social in general just all sounds the same, right? And I think a big reason for this is their copy that they're using. It's bland. It's boring. What's your opinion on that?
So I got a hot take for you, which is that it's nobody's fault. And the second part of that hot take is that we are trained to all sound the same by the LinkedIn algorithm. So the first part about it being nobody's fault is that nobody gets taught how to write. If you go back to the early days of advertising, you had copywriters and their job was just to write copy. And that copy's job was to sell products. That copy would then go to creatives. It would then go to media planners and so on and so forth. It's not until we've got into this kind of world of like personal brands and all of that stuff, more, I think, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, but we've been kind of building for a while, that people have been expected to just know how to do something that has been, a craft that's been taught to people. If you think about it, and everyone dusts off poor David Ogilvy, and I know he's dead, but I'm just going to drag him out of the ground for 10 fucking seconds. He was taught how to do the things that he does, right? George Orwell was taught how to do that. People like to show off Orwell's 5 rules for writing on LinkedIn, and they're like, you can write like Orwell, and it's like, you fucking can't. Right, because he's George Orwell. The advice is good, but these people have had training, right? These people are famous because they were good at what they did. And so it's kind of like a false equivalence. The second part about it with the LinkedIn thing, there's another thing in advertising where 80% of people only read the headline on an ad. So we talk about LinkedIn hooks, right? Everyone's like, oh, I have to write a hook. I have to write a hook. If you think about a hook as effectively being a headline, you have to learn how to write good headlines. And you learn how to write good headlines by writing headlines and trying to get people to buy things, and then they don't buy things, and you realize that your headline sucks, and you go back and you do it again, right? Or you're lucky enough to go to university or whatever. And so people aren't told how to do these things. We're just told, oh my God, LinkedIn now requires hooks. You better do this. And then, there's a whole bunch of people out there who are like, oh, I'm a LinkedIn guru. I know how to do everything, who just kind of feed shit to people because they don't know any better. So I think you're right. People do sound the same, and it can be really hard to break out of that. But I think the reverse part of that question would be, when was the last time you were taught how to write copy in a compelling way? Because even a university essay is not going to get you famous on LinkedIn, but it might get you an A+ at university, right?
I think that's really comforting and really validating, Seb, actually. So thank you for being refreshingly honest and not giving me the guru bullshit. And I think that's really important to start this conversation, actually. So thank you very much. And I'm so happy that you brought up your headline, your scroll stopper, whatever buzzwords you want to give it. And this is something that I really value within traditional press, actually, and something that I think a lot of people can tune into. I really want your opinion on this, Seb, because there's loads of different frameworks and blueprints and filters and things that you can put content through. And sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes it's not right for you and your audience, right? So there's always a caveat with all of this help and advice that we're giving with regards to copy. But I'm a huge advocate of grabbing attention straight away, particularly in this fast-paced social media scrolling world that we're in. And I just think it's such a crying shame, Seb, that there are so many super smart, intelligent people out there that know loads of incredible things about loads of intelligent stuff. And yet they're just pumping it full of it's just a big long blurb and no one's reading it right. So I guess my question to you is, Seb, how can someone start with their headlines grabbing attention on their LinkedIn profile, per se?
Yeah, so I kind of cheated at this because I went to journalism school and we were taught how to write headlines on day one. And this was way back when headlines had character counts. I'm going to age myself right now, Chris. And you had to get a certain number of characters and a certain number of words in because the newspaper didn't give a fuck, right? If you were feeling long-winded or not. And you had to be able to tell the story in that headline. So the idea should be that you can read an entire newspaper and understand what's going on in the world by only reading the headlines. And I think that people can approach this in the same way. I think if you can study, and I realize that's like a really fucking boring word, but if you can study different headlines and see the ones that work and think about the ones that make you click as in click through to the thing, click read more, then you can start to kind of emulate that. And you can think about, okay, these are the words that drive emotion, because this is one of the important things about copy. And I mentioned before that it's supposed to sell, and this is the whole point of it. But people buy and they do everything emotionally, and then they justify rationally, right? So what you want your headline to do is create an emotion in someone. And quite often people will use fear, right? FOMO, fear of missing out. Here's a headline that says you're going to miss out on something. You can also do it to laugh. You can do it if you want to make people cry, like just sort of all of the emotions. But that's effectively what you're trying to do. And so I think people can look at that. And then the second part is think about who your target audience is and who you want reading your post. So a really good example is I met a guy once who told me that he would never ever buy anything from Nike because of the language that they use in their advertising and stuff. He was like, why would I buy from a brand like that? You know, they're just putting me off. They shouldn't speak the way that they speak. And I was like, this is the point, right? The point is that they're qualifying you out. The point is that, you know, Nike doesn't want you buying their stuff, because for every kind of middle-aged man that feels off-put by Nike, there's 10,000 teenagers who will shell out 60 quid for a backpack. And that's what Nike's going after. And so I think for people creating on LinkedIn, it's also about thinking, you know, how do you qualify people out as much as you qualify people in?
Oh, Seb, I said to you before we went live, I said, well, normally these are about 20 minutes. I think this could go on for quite some time, my friend, because there's so much gold that you're sharing right now. A quick tip for people actually that are watching this back or listening to it, wherever you're tuning into Coffee with Chris around the world. Another reason why using a headline is so important is that point that Seb mentioned just there, is that read more button. Okay, if you press that, it's almost like a hidden tick box for the LinkedIn algorithm, and your post performance will improve and it'll stay longer in the feed. Of course, caveat, that might change tomorrow, but at the moment that's the case according to lots of results and research and reports. And the other thing you said there, Seb, which I'm so happy that you mentioned, everyone talks about qualifying. People don't talk about disqualifying. And then I think actually this is where, speaking about copy, Seb, we could have a quick ramble on your about section, because so many people, so many people on LinkedIn, or not even just on LinkedIn and social in general, they don't ask questions to not only qualify but to not disqualify. And why wouldn't you ask questions to disqualify? To save your time. Why would you want to invite time wasters? So what's your opinion on that side of things, Seb?
I mean, we're big fans of it, right? Everything that we do at Soba, from Noodle Club, our newsletter, right the way through to the LinkedIn posts that I post or the cold email outreach that we do, is about qualifying people out as much as it is about qualifying people in. So if we send an email out and people unsubscribe, it's like, okay, cool, you're not one of our people. I think the reason that people are scared to qualify people out is because they're scared of the lost opportunity cost. Because we see it as money on the table, right? As agency owners, as business owners, we think, well, if everyone can buy our thing, then we're going to be rich because everyone's bought our thing. And of course, that's not how the world works, right? It's not how agencies work. It's not how brands work. But I can understand that people get scared. We say the same thing around niching as well. We always talk to agencies about, you know, niching and positioning and how that impacts your copy. And people will say, well, we have an agency that can do everything and we do it for everyone and we don't want to niche. And the reason usually for that is fear. It's because they're worried that if they close down to one side of the market, they will just lose that market forever and there won't be anything to plug that gap. The Americans have an expression called the riches are in the niches. And that's just because they say niche fucking weird. But it's a very true, you know, the deeper that you can go in a niche, the more of an expert that you can be. And the more you can impress and show those people, you know, you don't need to make, well, this isn't true for everyone, right? I mean, it's probably not true for Primark, for example, but most businesses, especially the ones that you talk to and the ones that I talk to, don't need to have 1 million customers a year. They need 20 to 50. You know, if they're agencies and they're on retainers, you can have a very successful agency on 20 companies. So if your thing is bakeries and you can land 20 bakeries, you're in a good place.
Seb, you're leaking into tone of voice, which I'm definitely going to ask you about. I love it. And I want to move the conversation on, if that's okay, to something that I've noticed that you've got on your website, which is you've got this strong statement that says, words are at the heart and soul of everything you do. This is obviously something that you stand for in obviously your business. Does it annoy you or frustrate you or irritate you that almost copy has perhaps been neglected because of the rise of video content? Because video content is factually prioritized in most social media algorithms now versus just standard copy posts. Does it irritate you? Because I think there's a marriage to be had between the two.
Yeah, I think you're trying to get me in a moment of great irony, right? Where I'm like on a video podcast being like, video is going to kill the radio star, or at least the copywriter. But it didn't, and it won't. And I think one of the really interesting things people need to remember is that like a lot of times people will click on a video and watch it. They will watch it on silent and they'll read the subtitles, right? And the subtitles obviously aren't part of the copy, but the copy on a LinkedIn post for a video is all of the stuff that's above it. So if you don't want to listen to someone's video on loud, it might be easier for you just to skim the copy at the top. Or it might be that you've not seen that person create a video before, and you're thinking a lot of the time people make video, they waffle kind of like I'm doing now, and they never get to the fucking point. But copy has a character limit. So you can scan through that and say, okay, that was interesting. I'd like to now watch this video. I mean, even TikTok has a 4,000 character limit for videos that you post. So I think, you know, you're very much right. There is a marriage to be had. I think copy is more important than ever. And people should think about how it works with video, not just for headlines and getting people to click, but the content that goes around the video as well.
I could not agree with you more. Hashtag so good, Seb. That's your new hashtag. So good, so good, Seb.
So good, sober.
Yeah. So good, sober, Seb. There you go. You'll love that one. I actually think as well, your copy can get people to watch more of the video, if that makes sense. Like by saying certain things, asking certain questions, which we don't have the time to go into the real nuts and bolts of right now. But I definitely think there's a marriage to be had there. And it does frustrate me. It really irritates me that the people I speak to, it's all about video. It's all about video. Nothing else matters. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You need the copy to help enhance the video. So many people invest, and rightly so, by the way, in some incredible video content. I know loads of good video agencies and freelancers locally and nationally that do such good work. And I think it's a crying shame, Seb, because then they don't think about their copy and they're almost just wasting that investment with the video, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you think about it, when was the last time you saw a TV ad or a cinema ad that didn't have some kind of copy with it? I mean, if you look at the new Pepsi Max ads, not the print ones, but the cinema ones, they say everything tastes better with Pepsi Max, better with Pepsi Max, all that kind of stuff. That copy is on the screen as much as and as often as, you know, the soundtrack is playing, people are talking. Like, it's a very important part of it. And I think people are just overlooking that. But again, it's nobody's fault, right? We're told that video performs best. LinkedIn says, okay, video is going to perform best. Yes. And so that's the direction everyone starts running. I'm really in a bite the hand that feeds kind of mood. Just going after LinkedIn today.
Seb, a geeky random question that I wasn't going to ask you, but I am. And it's very random. It doesn't fit in place here, but I want to ask it to you. What's your opinion on businesses being so inspired by Apple that their copy and their content is gone from really long stuff to super short stuff. Because again, I can kind of see the positives and negatives to it. I think it's sexy, I think it's in, but is really short and sweet things, is that where it's going with your business copy?
It's interesting that you asked that, because sometimes it depends on the business, and it depends on the thing that you sell and the problem that you're trying to solve. Every time someone likens themselves to Apple, we have to remind them that they don't have the brand equity that Apple has, for starters, right? We look at Apple now and we think, wow, Apple's incredible, but they've been doing incredible things for a very long time. The other thing we have to think about is that a lot of those people don't have the marketing budget that Apple has, right? Apple didn't just come up with a great copy line and then send it to the market and sell millions of Macs. These things have been tried and tested. And then on the length of copy, this is one that I think really like highlights Soba as being kind of old school. We still know and we still believe and we can still prove that long copy outsells short copy 80 to 90% of the time. Because when you look at short copy, you have very little that you can do with that space, right? You can maybe work on a fare, work on a benefit. You know, you might say like buy Toblerone, for example. And you'd be like, well, why the fuck would I buy Toblerone? And Toblerone's like, buy Toblerone. And that's the end of the conversation. But long copy has been used by people like the New York Times and so many other news organizations to increase subscriptions from people, because long copy gives you space to handle all of the objections that you need to handle, sell all the benefits that you need to sell, pull on all the fares that you need to pull on. Where it falls down is that every fucker with a keyboard thinks he's a copywriter. And they'll write this really long copy and it'll be absolute dog shit. And they'll send it out and they'll say, long copy doesn't work, it's a waste of time. And this is where these things kind of start to like really fall apart, right? Things haven't stopped working. It's just that now we don't go to the professionals to do things.
Yes.
We look at things ourselves and say, oh, well, fuck it, I can probably do that. Everyone on LinkedIn can post, so I can probably write a sales letter. But if that were true, we would all be selling all of our, you know, products and services like mad, and we'd all be filthy rich, and we wouldn't be having podcasts where we talk about how to make our copy better, you know?
So Seb, this leads so nicely on. You've already started to leak into that so well. It's seamless. It's almost like you've done this before. The truth is, Seb, the reason why I wanted to get you on today was of this corporate jargon piece. And this links directly to long form copy and using way too many words, in my humble opinion. How can people sort of get over corporate jargon? And is this perhaps a question around tuning into tone of voice? How do businesses actually tune into tone of voice? Because it's kind of a bit of a marketing buzz phrase. People use it, but I know that business owners don't get tone of, they don't understand that. But what are the stepping stones for businesses to actually, you know, get on the runway with tone of voice?
I think the first thing, just on your point about jargon, is like know who you're selling to, and know what you're selling to them inside out. So Dan and I, before we started Soba, we were both in-house marketers for our whole careers, right? And we came out of that and we thought we really want to work with agencies. But we've done tons of different stuff. Dan has worked for Unilever. I've worked for a bunch of really deep tech B2B companies. And so as an example, I was selling cybersecurity hardware to like Five Eyes governments, banks, you know, all of those kinds of people. And I'm going to tell you something now that no one's going to know what the fuck it means, right? But we did packet capture technology. And you're like, what's packet? Right, exactly, right? So for you and I, this is jargon. We're like, what's packet capture? Basically, you send a piece of data from one point of the internet to the other, like we're doing right now on this call, and it gets broken down to these tiny little packets. Packet capture technology allows you to capture that packet and recreate it, so you can see exactly what was sent, who it was sent to, when it was sent, all of that sort of stuff. If you're selling something complicated like that, you need to use jargon. All those people that are on LinkedIn being like, oh, copy should never include jargon. You're a fucking idiot. Shut up. Go and find another job. You need to understand what works for the people that you're selling to, because if you're selling to technical people, technical things are going to work for them, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing for tone of voice is really about like understanding what works for the people that you write for. Because if you're talking to decision makers in Deloitte, they're going to expect a very different tone of voice to the way that you and I have been sort of conversing at the moment, right? The people I work with are agency owners. They're people like me. They're people like you. They're not people that are the heads of Deloitte. We're not going after Mother or 𝗖𝗵𝗳𝗲𝗲, which kind of lets me be the way that I am with my tone of voice. If you look at my LinkedIn or our newsletter and stuff, we go for really relatable. We go for saying we understand your pain because we're also in your pain. You know, we've been through the troubles that you've been through. So it's all about finding out who that audience is that you're trying to talk to, and then talking to them in a way that works, and understanding the difference between unnecessary words in a sentence and, you know, things like corporate jargon. So I think that's really where you have to start. Understand what makes the jargon, you know, work and is powerful because of your audience. Know your audience inside out, what you want to say to them and how you want to say it and what works for them. And then the third thing is test it. Right? Everything should be tested all the time. We don't talk about this enough in marketing, but just test, and test again. Send an email out and make it have a little slightly different tone of voice to the other one. See if your click-through rate goes up. The thing is it can be scary when you're on the sending side, but when you're on the receiving side, most people don't notice most of the time anyway, unless you go from, you know, talking in sort of the Queen's English to like an Irvin Welsh novel, but no one's going to go from, you know, those polar opposites overnight anyway. Where you land is probably somewhere in between.
So good, Soba Seb. Next up, how can you create, craft, curate your copy, particularly on social, to actually shoot towards your commercial objectives? Because again, there seems to be a very black and white opinion on this, is marketing fluff, and it's purely, it's call to actiony. It's, you know, the old Gary V, right hook rather than your jab. It's quite, it's maybe too pushy. So how do people get that right, Seb? Because I know that this is something that you guys at Soba Private Label specialize in. So I'm quite keen to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Copy has to sell. This is why it exists, right? We do sales copy, we do advertisements, we do website copy, all of that kind of stuff. Copy needs to have a purpose. It's not there to make you feel good. It's not there so that you read it and think, oh, my website's delightful today. It's there to get someone to buy emotionally so that they can later on justify rationally. And the whole, I'm going to like avoid the Gary Vee thing because I could go off on that guy for days and days. But, you know, it's really about making sure that you understand the purpose of your copy, what you want your copy to achieve, and knowing that, you know, this is something that's existed in sales and in marketing for more than 200 years. We're not doing new things. The things that used to work still work because people haven't changed. Right, we're monkeys with iPhones, effectively. The things that still light up our brains will always light up our brains when it comes to, you know, emotions and fears and that kind of thing. And so what you need to do is think about how all of that works together for your company, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Go back and look at some of the old successful ads from the 1800s or, you know, the 1900s, and you'll see that they include a lot of the things today. And you'll also notice that, you know, once you've read through some of those ads and you look at people's LinkedIn posts, that whether they know it or not, they're replicating that same formula, because these have always worked, right? We just like to pretend that they don't, because we've sort of, in air quotes, like democratized access to advertising. You know what I mean? Like now anyone can make an ad on Canva and post it on Facebook. So it's like, who needs an advertising agency, right? And because of that, and because of that sort of misdirection by the social media companies, people have stopped realizing that things that once worked continue to work.
So good, Soba Seb. Why? I should have a button for that now, shouldn't I?
Yeah, as long as people know it's SOBA and not ER, because then I wouldn't be living up to my reputation.
Why are people scared of telling people to actually do something? So I'll give you a very quick story. Literally yesterday, I was speaking with a prospect. I need to be careful here. And they said, look, Chris, this is what we've got going on social. Give me your rough thoughts on it. And I was flicking through it and I was thinking, okay, this all is lovely, it's fluffy, it's friendly, it's warm, it makes me feel good. But you've touched on something there, Seb, you touched a nerve there. But they didn't tell me to buy the thing that they were goddamn selling. So why are people so scared of doing that, Seb?
Partly, you know, I think it's a cultural thing. Have you ever met an American that's scared of sales?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either.
So it's so you're saying that could be a British thing?
I think it's partly a British thing. Yeah, I think it's partly that people are worried about being pushy as well. No one wants to go, you know, the salesperson has this really sort of deeply ingrained stereotype of being really pushy, and, you know, they don't let you go. And you see that. I mean, I see that in my LinkedIn DMs like every day. Someone pitches me something, I say no thanks, and they say, what about this? What about that? And I was like, dude, no. We're not a SaaS company for starters, you know. So I think it's that, as well as that, like, sales just has a bad reputation.
Right.
And, you know, but copy is about being persuasive, and it's about showing people why they need the thing that you're selling, and about tapping into that response. And again, you know, most people aren't taught how to do sales either, right? They see a film that's got a pushy salesperson in it, and they think, well, God, I run a company, but I don't want to be like that. So what can I do? Where does that leave me? I mean, I went through exactly the same thing, man. I was like, I don't want to be a salesperson. I didn't start a business to be a fucking salesperson, because I had that idea, right? I tend to think of it now as biz dev. I tell people I have biz dev calls booked in instead of sales calls. It's the same thing, but my little snowflake mind.
But then sorry to interrupt you then, so how do people get the balance right then? Because they have to tell someone to do something eventually, right? Because if not, you're just posting a load of fluff that doesn't help your business with its commercial objectives. So what do you have any kind of quick tips or takeaways off the top of your head that you could maybe share with our audience? How can you get your call to action right? And I know that there's a lot of context that has to be had here around audience and who and which business and all of that stuff. But is there anything that you would advise on your call to actions to get that balance right?
I'd say just, you know, don't be afraid to have a brass neck about it. The thing that you think is too much is probably not going to be registered by other people. And so if you're writing your own sales copy and you're thinking, wow, this is really strong, it's really salesy, maybe I'm pushing it too much, I would say at that point is probably when you want to put it in the market. You know, there's a System1 did a study recently that proved that ads don't wear out, they wear in. The more times people see them, the more they remember them, the more effective they become. And so you can take a good ad and effectively run it forever. You know, like Coca-Cola owns Santa, right? They've been running Santa for like 30 years or something for that reason. And this is the same with your copy too. It's like if you have a brass neck enough and you push it a bit further than you're comfortable, and you get it out there and it starts working and you've tested it, then you can just keep running it. You only need to get it right once, right? You might do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tests with different landing pages, and you should do tests that make you feel kind of uncomfortable, do tests that are right in your comfort zone, do some that you feel like are in the middle. And then once you've got the formula, you know, you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Totally with you. Absolutely. Seb, what are the 3 big or main mistakes that business people in general are making with their copy? What are the things that you see that you tear your hair or in your case your beard out?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You know, I felt like this was coming, and I think the first one is not understanding the purpose of copy, right? That's the first thing. Copy has to sell. If it's not selling, it's not working. You see people call themselves conversion copywriters, and it's like, as opposed to what? Like, this is your fucking job. The second one is making sure that you know your audience, you know it works for your audience, right? Because a lot of people don't. We talk to people quite often, and I mean absolutely no shade whatsoever when I say this, but they don't have a strong positioning, and their company doesn't have a strong position in the market. They might have a really beautiful brand, but it's not really clear what they offer or who they offer that to. And if you aren't clear on who your ICP is, your target market, your niche, whatever you want to call it, your copy is going to suffer because you're going to be trying to cover too many people at once. And then I think the third one is just remembering that, you know, people buy, and I've talked about this a lot, but people buy emotionally and justify rationally. And that's at the core of what we do. Our job is to persuade people to take an action. It's not sexy. We're not saving lives. We're not doctors or school teachers or any of those people. You know, our job with the words that we write is to persuade people to take an action. So, like, don't forget that that's the thing that it's supposed to do.
That's like a mic drop moment to stop. And I just love, I mean, there's so much there that I mean, we need a round two at some stage, Seb. We'll have to book it in. But I think the thing for me, my biggest takeaway personally, having listened to you today, is that reminder of people buy emotionally first, then logically second, and actually creating your copy in that order, I think is a really important thing to do. Seb, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people connect with you? How can they find you?
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. The URL is just /Seb Mackay. Though I'm sure you'll be tagging people. We're also on Substack. We have an agency newsletter called Noodle Club. So if you search for that on Substack, or go noodleclub.substack.com. And we're also at soba.agency. That's SOBA, because we do drink, but we also like noodles. It's very confusing.
Seb,
Drunken noodles, however.
I'm so pleased that you've rocket launched yourself into my world, and I'm so happy that you've shared your wealth of wisdom with us today. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much to you guys watching or perhaps listening back to this episode of the Coffee with Chris. As always, let us know your thoughts, feelings, and feedback. Chuck a comment on social media, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and apart from that, I will see you next week on another episode of Coffee with